18th of March 2021, on a very stormy night in St. Louis, Missouri. Heinrich Grünewald headed home at around 4 a.m. from a late-night bar. The slight thick fog outside smothered his surroundings. However, he noticed a black pickup truck heading in the opposite direction and quickly sped off into the night. He arrived home to discover his wife on the bedroom floor, with noticeable amounts of blood, and their child missing from his bedroom. The side of her head was stained red, and warm blood oozed down her face as her body laid motionless, with her back pressed against the bedroom wall. Heinrich mercilessly dialed 911, where the police and ambulance soon arrived and brought her to the hospital. She was miraculously still alive, with a bullet lodged onto the right side of her head, though she remained unconscious on her way to the hospital. If only he had been a little earlier or not stayed at the bar with his coworkers that late, maybe he could have prevented this from happening. Police investigated the crime scene. Before the victim left to be treated for her wounds, the police noticed her hands had injuries from wooden fragments and sawdust. Several valuables inside the house were gone. Their bedroom cupboard had a lock that was busted open. Contents in the closet were pulled out violently. The new security cameras in and around the house were damaged, with the stored footage completely erased. The victim's SIM card was found inside the kitchen trash can, with her phone nowhere to be found. Investigators questioned the people around the neighborhood whether they heard or seen anything that early morning, but no one reported anything or heard a gunshot going off, given that most were asleep and it was raining heavily at the time of the shooting. Jace Donovan Grünewald, 26, was the victim of the shooting. She grew up in rural Missouri and moved into St. Louis, Missouri. She met her husband, Heinrich Grünewald, in the city, and both became adopters to Jace's younger sibling, Tilacus Donovan. They treated him like a son, and the brother-sister relationship grew much stronger between Jace and Lucas. However, not all was well when entering 2020. A new virus outbreak from Wuhan, China, created a global pandemic, placing everyone on home quarantine. Jace tried to act as if nothing was wrong, hiding how she truly felt about her situation. She would sometimes hide in the bedroom and felt anxious and depressed for most of the home quarantine period. She had a harder time trusting people around her, even with her own husband. Over time, she would go outside more often with Lucas and sometimes not return home for multiple days at a time. Jace never lets her husband know where she is going or how long she will be out. Heinrich, furious at her constant absence and her lack of explanation of why she goes off the radar with Lucas for multiple days, accused her of having affairs with numerous people. Yet, she refused his claims. He wanted to spend more time with his wife and help comfort her, but she didn't want to. She refused to tell him where she had been or why she has been going outside much more often. It's as if she wanted to hide something from him. Because of Jace's and Lucas's constant disappearance over the last few months, Heinrich would sometimes call the police to report Jace and Lucas as missing persons, as he worried about their safety. But the police never took his claims seriously. They brushed off his claim saying that it's nothing serious, and instead they called him an incompetent husband and father, before hanging up the call. During the endless stinging chills in the early morning, Heinrich got into an argument with his wife, berating at Jace and calling her a f***ing slut. Leading towards the gloomy night, he vented to his co-workers about what had happened that morning. They tried to help him by taking him to a bar to chat and relax a bit from the turbulent relationship. After some long, winding, consolidating and discussing with his co-workers, his hand shaking anxiously, tried to call his wife around 3 a.m. He wanted to apologize for yelling at her due to the heat of the moment. His attempt to call didn't reach her phone. He repeated a second time, couldn't contact her phone yet again. Each unsuccessful call to her got him more and more anxious. He headed back home after 7 attempts of calling her, never knew what awaits him in their bedroom. When it came to Jace's little brother, Lucas, he didn't act different like his sister. He always felt shy and distant from the other children, since his upbringing was in the countryside and not in the suburbs. The children would often call him an outsider, alien, and a redneck. He never talked much with anyone, and neither did the children speak with him. Lucas usually goes home by bus, though Jace gradually became the person that picked up Lucas instead. She binds her hand strongly with Lucas's hand and was very protective of him. After Christmas break, he rarely came to school as he was with his older sister instead. The few times Lucas was at his school, he would often draw about the fun trips he had with his sister, with most being in motels inside his school notebook. Given this information, investigators began reviewing hundreds of hours worth of surveillance footage in and around motels, searching for Jace and Lucas's whereabouts during 2021. Out of the countless motels within the St. Louis area, surveillance footage from 17 different motels has captured Jace and Lucas together. In most of the footage, a black pickup truck seems to always stop where Jace and Lucas are for several minutes before leaving the area. Heinrich was at the side, watching the surveillance footage with the investigators. The imagery of that truck haunted him. With panic in his eyes, he identified that the black pickup truck as the vehicle he saw that early morning when he found his wife shot and unconscious. Unfortunately, the windows were tinted black, so the driver can't be seen, and it was too blurry to make out the license plate on the truck. Their best guess of the criminal with limited blurry footage is it seemed like a male assailant with a very large build. Trying to find the criminal that shot Jace is like a needle in a haystack. Given the population of urban St. Louis is over 2 million people, the black pickup truck isn't much of a unique vehicle, so it won't be easy to find him, with many others owning the same kind of truck. The last time Jace was seen on camera was in the Home Depot on the 13th of March, buying woodworking tools, materials, and security cameras. That was very unusual for her, since she never had an interest in woodworking. Heinrich has also noted some slight sawdust odors in the house. She also never really had prior issues with security either, but had been paranoid when leading to her being attacked. There were multiple attempts made where the investigators tried to contact Jace's side of the family to see if they could gather more clues on the perpetrator and the disappearance of Lucas. But given they live in rural Missouri, have no contact details of her family or their location, and the only person who knows their contacts is in a coma, they couldn't reach them for investigation. Lucas is placed as a missing person on the 30th of March and was broadcasted across the media. Posters of Lucas are plastered across the northern suburbs of St. Louis, hoping that the surrounding civilian had seen him. On the 3rd of April, someone reported seeing a little boy that looked like Lucas at the Quick Trip petrol station in Wentzville along the Interstate 70 highway, roughly 55 kilometers away from where he disappeared. It was around 5 in the morning, the same morning of Lucas's disappearance. Eyes half open and yawning at the rising sun, the witness filled up her car and stared at the car in front of her. The car looked as if it had originated from the 80s, and its color bluish. A little boy was inside that car and was noticeably muddy and dirty in the back seat. He looked to be 7 to 8, had short brownish hair, and most of all, had prominent protruding ears just like Lucas's. A white male in his 40s came back from paying the petrol and got in the car with the little boy. The boy was at first worried and scared, but he seemed to be relieved with the man, and the man seemed to be very caring of the little boy. Almost seems that he's comforting him like his own son, though the man didn't match up with the description of the criminal having a very large build. The car soon pulled out of the station and traveled on the Interstate 70 highway, heading away from St. Louis. No one knows for sure where the car might have headed, but all they know is they are heading away from St. Louis to who knows where. In mid-April, Heinrich wanted to replace the broken cupboard from that incident because of its damaged condition and the trauma tied to it. While moving the closet, he suddenly noticed some sawdust under it. He took a closer look, and the floorboards underneath the cabinet had a rectangular shape. He reached his hands out to touch that part of the floor. It was found that the floorboards were actually removable, where someone could go through and under the house's wooden foundation. The size of the hole was big enough for a large dog to escape through, and there was a gravel trail that slithered to the outside of the house. The trail made on the gravel looks as if a child crawled under the house and towards the outside. It's almost as if it was made for such purposes. Given this new evidence, the story likely points to Jace buying woodworking tools and materials to create a secret exit out of the house for Lucas to escape through. The lock fitted through the closet handle may have been used to hide Lucas from the criminal. He may have fortunately escaped from the criminal, but his location is still unknown. But on the 9th of May, Mother's Day, Jace Donovan Grünewald passed away in a coma at the hospital after fighting for her life for 52 days. Lucas could not be there to see his sister before she died, still missing to this day. Heinrich was never able to formally apologize to his wife for what he had said to her. He gently holds onto her frail, cold hands on her deathbed, alone, just the two of them. The last words Jace heard from her husband would haunt Heinrich for a very long time. On the 6th of December 2021, 8.5 months since Lucas went missing, a backpacker that arrived from Kansas City stopped by a McDonald's in Clinton, Missouri for a quick meal. Across her table, she sees a phone that looked familiar. Its blue swirl phone case design stood out to her. A little boy walks to his table opposite the backpacker after a bathroom break, picks up the phone, and starts using the phone she had been eyeing for a while. It was then that she realized he was the missing child she saw on the news, Lucas Donovan, and he has his deceased sister's phone in his hands.